Hi, I'm Rainer, and welcome to my train room. Decided I'm going to build another house, and this is another one of the Walther's Trainline houses. Inexpensive kit. I think I picked this up at a train show. I built a similar kit to this. I think it was called a rooming house or something. It's up at the other end, painted yellow. I can put the link up to the previous video up here. In fact, I think this is actually the same molds, the same house. They used a different structure. This has like a little balcony, and the other one had kind of stairs and stuff on the outside to make it look different, but I think it's basically the same kit. So I'm going to open this up, see what I can do. Again, this is one of those kits that says, plastic parts molded in color, no painting needed. Well, if you do that, it ends up looking like a really plastic kit. And also this base with this fake grass around the bottom, I'm probably not going to use that. I didn't use it on the other one because those don't look very good either. So anyway, I'm going to get this thing opened up and see what I can do to make it look a little bit better than it does in the picture on the front of the box. So these kits are usually pretty simple to build, nothing too complicated about them. 4 walls and a roof for the main structure, and then there's the front part and the balconies and things like that. So nothing too complicated, but what I will be doing is pulling all of this out, and it is all going to get painted. So the roof is definitely going to get a spray of flat black and then get painted and weathered. The doors, they're kind of this slightly off-white plastic, and the window frames definitely need a paint job before I put them in. I'll have to clean all the little flashing and stuff off the edges, but definitely need to get painted before I put them on. Otherwise, if I illuminate the inside of the building and I use these white doors, the doors are just going to glow white, and that's not going to look very realistic. And these are the parts for the deck. Same thing, I think I will paint those and the roof all with a flat black spray, and then there's a brick chimney, things like that. I'll paint them all, glue them together, and then, weather them and paint the base. I won't even be using, just set that aside. And these walls definitely need a coat of paint. Again, I think I will be painting these things with a spray of black paint and then painting different colors on them. There's brick at the bottom that's going to have to be painted to look like brick, and then this siding will get a different spray of paint. So I think the first thing that's going to have to happen with all of this is all of these sprues, the walls, the deck sections, the roof are all going to need to get painted with a flat black as a primer. And then the doors, depending on the color I decide to go with, I'll probably go with a darker color on those, so they might not need the primer, but they all need to be sprayed as well, or painted with a brush. I haven't decided which yet, depending on the color I choose. But I will need to clean the flashing off and actually remove them from the sprue, because otherwise there's going to be little white spots showing everywhere where they were attached to the sprue. So I'll have to remove them first and then paint them. So let's get started with the black primer on these. So at this point, I have primed and or painted most or all of the parts. So the deck sections and the chimney sections here are primed flat black. The roof sections, they're like this shingle kind of, cedar shingle kind of roof, is primed black. I'm going to be hand painting that, kind of dry brushing some acrylic paint on that. These will receive similar kind of treatment, different colors, of course. And the wall sections, I primed them flat black, and then I painted them with this Tamiya spray can of paint. So what I'm going to do now is I am going to cut them from the sprues and glue the wall sections together. And then I'm going to see how they look. I'm going to see to make sure that the corner joints go okay, because if it messes up the paint on the corners, I want to glue them together first so that if I mess up the paint on the corners while gluing it, I can just touch them up with the spray can, because I don't have some of this paint in anything but the spray can. So I'm going to do that next. Once that's done, and the paint is looking good and the glue is dried, I'm going to start painting the brick at the bottom of the walls. Paint that by hand. And then the next thing will be to install the window frames, which I have painted all the window frames and railings for the stairs and things like that with some Floqual roof brown paint. Just hand painted those. And so I'm going to start with the assembly of the walls, get those glued together. If they look good, I'm going to paint the bricks at the bottoms, and then I'm going to start painting some of these sections before I assemble them together, because a lot of times they're a lot easier to paint before I put them on the house. So let's see how this goes. So I've built it to this point, and next I'm going to be installing some LED lighting in this, and then attaching the other half of the roof, putting the chimneys on both buildings, and then I will do just a little bit more weathering around the windows, because I'm trying to make it look like an older house that's, in a small town or village, and, just, I don't want it to look like a freshly painted, brand new, nice and shiny house. And I'll cover a little more of what happened with this little piece of wood on the front of the deck. Maybe not the best way to deal with it, but it's what I had, and I'll explain what happened. So the first step was I assembled the walls. I glued the 4 walls together, and I used MEK to glue them together. I just cleaned the beveled edges off, scraped and sanded the paint off to make sure that it was going to actually stick properly. So I did that with the 4 main walls of this building, of the house, and as well as the smaller building that comes with it. Now, these 2 buildings come with a little rectangular base to put in the bottom. I didn't actually put the base in when I was assembling them, because I found that sometimes when I'm trying to do that, especially with these little houses, the base kind of gets in the way of me getting the corners lined up nice and tight. I just find, you're trying to deal with 3 pieces flopping around. So I glued all the corners of the walls together, and then I fit this base in, and that kind of squares up the bottom. Now I left the 2 pieces of sprue in the middle because they're not hurting anything, and they just keep the walls from actually squishing in on the bottom. So unless you have some real reason to cut them out, I can't see why you would. Now, they're flat right across the bottom. They don't get in the way, and just they keep the walls from collapsing. So glued those in, and then I gave it another quick spray of this green paint just to cover up any kind of marks on the corners from me handling it and gluing it together. All the roof panels, because I primed them black first, I then just gave them kind of like a dry brush with a fairly stiff brush of acrylic paint, some grays and brown mixtures, just to kind of make them look a little bit older and make the the shingles stand out. And I did the same kind of thing with all of the deck parts for here and for the front. And I also did with that with the brick chimneys, glued them together first and then gave them a coat of paint. Once that was done, I then proceeded to paint this bottom brick, and I gave it a couple of different coats of, starting with a black or almost black acrylic paint, and then another kind of a light dry brush of more gray paint. And it's kind of modeled around, varies. It's supposed to look like old dirty brick. Then I installed the window frames. So once I had the window frames in, I then gave it a bit of a wash of some Floquil. I think it was Floquil grime. I have some of this old paint, so I diluted it with some diasol and just gave a wash of it over the top, just so it would kind of settle into the cracks and make it look a little bit dirtier and a little bit older. But then I found that there was still too much shine of this green paint coming through, so I gave the whole thing a coat of a sprayed acrylic dull coat to just dull it down, and that kind of blended everything in together. And that grime, by the way, also kind of leaked down into these grooves of this brick and made the brick stand out even more. So I'm kind of happy with how that turned out. Then I installed the window glass. It's a clear piece of plastic. You just cut them. I put them on the inside, glued them into the inside of the windows. And then I started working on, and when I was working on it, I did kind of the same steps along with this building at the same time. And then the front decks, I put the bottom deck in, followed the instructions as to where these little pillars go and which railings there are. And what seemed to happen for me, I don't know why, when I followed the instructions and did all of that, these pillars, when they're vertical, end up actually sticking out a little bit past the bottom deck. And I can't really bend them in at an angle because the railings down at the bottom don't allow me to do that. So when I put the top deck on, they were only kind of halfway onto the posts, this deck, unless I pulled it away from the house, but that wouldn't work either. So what I decided to do was, for better or worse, I just stuck a strip of wood on here, and I'm going to paint that brown to blend it in, and hopefully it won't look too bad. Now, keep in mind, this house is going to be kind of where I'm thinking of putting it is closer to the back of the layout, so nobody's going to be looking at it too closely. I've glued the one half of the roof on, including this little window up at the top. Glued the back section on with a little roof section there. And the next thing I'm going to be doing is installing some lights. So I've taken a couple of little warm white LEDs and stuck them in these styrene tubes just to work as a bit of a diffuser. And there is one 510 ohm, I believe, resistor in this circuit. And in this house, I'm doing the same thing I've done with all of my other houses. I'm using these little 2-pin plugs that I bought on Amazon as the connectors, so that I leave those in there, and then I can plant my house wherever I want, and I have the corresponding plug under the layout to just plug it in or unplug it as needed. And if I want to change one house from another spot, they all have the same plug. That's going to be the next thing. I'm going to glue these lights inside the house here somewhere. I've also put a piece of like black construction paper inside to block the light, so when you look through the windows, you're not looking right out the windows on the other side. So again, near the back of the layout, I'm not going to worry about doing a lot of detail on it. So that's going to be my next step. Get these lights glued in here, leave that to sit for a while, and then glue the remaining roof piece on. And I think this roof here is supposed to be, when it comes with a different kit, you can put this roof up here. I haven't really decided if I want to put it on there or not. I guess I could, but I haven't really decided whether I want to put that little canopy on there or just leave it open, because that's also a possibility. I might just leave it open because it makes it look very different than the other house. Put the lights in, put the roof on, attach the chimneys, do a little bit more weathering on the outside, paint this brown, and it should be ready to go on the layout. So I got it built and onto the layout. Now this one right here is the earlier house that I built, and that's the one I built right now. And so as you can tell, they are definitely the same molds, the same everything, not quite the same kit though, because on this one they had this set of stairs at the front, and so the front of it looks a little different, and they called it a rooming house, and that one is just called a house. So I got it onto the layout. I glued the lights in. I don't have the lights plugged in right now because I'm not sure that that's where I'm going to leave the house, so I haven't drilled a hole through the layout yet to run the wires. I did a little bit more weathering kind of below the windows. Just used a little bit of acrylic paint with brush, just a little bit of streaks and things like that. Did a little bit of that on the corners, just kind of make it look like it's a little more aged. And overall, I think it turned out okay. So I have a number of these less expensive houses that I bought. These two are the basic Walther's Trainline kits based on some old kits that have been out for years. I've got a couple of houses at the other end of the layout that I paid like $2 each for them. And the trick with these houses to make them look like they're not quite as cheap as they are is the painting. Do some careful painting on them and some weathering, and you can make them look just so much nicer and so much more interesting. And especially, you know, with the roof, these, just if it was just a plastic roof with these shingles, it wouldn't look very realistic. But with a little bit of painting, it adds a little bit of variation to the shade and the color of the roof. So anyway, it's there. Got somebody standing on the deck already waving. And as I get more houses built for this area, this is going to be my little small town or village, kind of a northern town. It's going to be a little bit more rustic looking than what I'm doing at the other end on the lower deck. This area right in here, I don't know if you can see it, it's indented down and it's going to need to be painted a different color, and eventually I'm going to be pouring some resin in here to make a small lake scene here as well. So these houses will be sitting around a little bit of a lake here. Anyway, hopefully this gives you some more ideas on how to paint one of these houses, get them built, and get them looking somewhat interesting at least. And thank you for watching. And if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. See you next time.